I've looked at these videos just a little enough to know that if I'm not real careful, I can look real grumpy. My wife has told me when I'm up in front of people that I need to make an effort to smile more, because otherwise I look really grumpy, and I don't feel grumpy. But you know, some people just have the corners of the mouth just go up. It's kind of a natural thing. They just look happy all the time. Well, I'm not one of them, but it's not to say that I'm not happy. It's just to say that the corners of my mouth don't go up like some people's do. So if you think I'm having a bad day, I might be, but I might not be too. So don't jump to conclusions because of the corners of my mouth. Last upload that we made was called "You Can't Make Me Mad." And I hope you've had a chance to think about it. The point with all of these is to scratch down deep enough that we find the rocky bottom, like we've talked about before in those early videos. Something that we're someplace where we can set a lamppost and start our discovery and build something worthwhile. And if you think about what we said there toward the end, and said a little bit about guilt, and I related a couple of stories, and I hope they tied into the idea that we're kind of in control, and that it's all about messaging. And you'll keep hearing me say that, because you'll come to realize that it is about messaging and about hearkening to the message. It's important that we discern the message. And by the way, I think that's a skill, and it's a dying skill because of all the confusion in the world, all the noise and chatter, especially in this day of multimedia and information overload and so many opinions. And I realize I'm one of them now, if you're listening to these, but we are on an overload. It's impossible to absorb it all and make sense of it and act on it unless we can discard what doesn't matter. And that's kind of what I've been trying to help you, my posterity, and others listening in to realize. We've got to figure out what matters, and then learn to focus on it, focus on that message that pertains to what matters, and then learn to discard the other. And a big part of that is not being deceived. You know, Michael Jordan, the great basketball player, I don't know what his final earnings ended up being. It's nowhere near what they are today, but I remember back in the day when he was kind of in his prime, maybe even a little bit before that, he was making big money selling or playing basketball. But he was making, and by the way, they're making horrendous amounts more than that now, which is a whole topic for a whole nother day, maybe several days. But he was making really big money playing basketball, millions upon millions of dollars. I want to say, like, back in those days, it was like 6 million, and that was a big deal. Now it's 45 million, and I don't know what it'll be 10 years from now, but or not 45 million, but 450 million, and he was making like, I forgot, it was millions and millions. I'd have to research it to tell you the exact number, but that part doesn't really matter. It's what caught my attention with that whole story is that he was making way more money selling hamburgers as advertising for McDonald's than he was playing basketball. Now, it takes some skill to play basketball. He can draw fans into the arenas, and they want to pay it. That's one thing. But think about it. About this whole notion of being deceived. Because he would not be receiving millions of dollars more than his salary at basketball unless it was working for McDonald's. They were benefiting from his endorsement of their hamburgers. Do you think that he had any better taste in hamburgers than you or I do? Michael Jordan sits down and eats a hamburger just like the rest of us. But if he says he likes it, for some reason, everybody else has got to say, oh, Michael Jordan likes that hamburger. I want to be like Michael Jordan, therefore I'll eat one of the hamburgers that he likes. Think about the rationale behind all that. Think about the business world capitalizing on our being deceived and acting upon the wrong thing. So it's easy to get deceived. And then he went on with Nike shoes and I don't know how many endorsements, but that's where he made his money. That's where he became so wealthy. I think he's close to a billionaire now. Well, it didn't come from playing basketball. It came from us being deceived and acting upon our deception. Doesn't that kind of haunt you a little bit? It haunts me. It haunts me to think that our society is such that they could fall for something like that. And of course, if other people can profit from our failure to not be deceived, then they'll profit on it. And it's so I guess I mentioned that because it's something we need to be on guard for all the time: deception. When I say my prayers at night, there's rarely a night that I don't mention 2 or 3 things. Well, I mentioned several things, but along these lines, I pray that I might understand and apply truth and help others to do the same. And then I add the words, and to avoid deception. The reason I've learned to add those words is because I have found myself sometimes starting to follow a certain line of thinking or a certain person or a modern day Michael Jordan. I mean, it's been going on forever, and it's caused some damage. It messes us up. So it dumbfounds me why we're like that. They don't allow advertising of like cigarettes on TV anymore, but when I was a kid, this is the kind of advertisement you'd see. Now keep in mind, I was just, a kid growing up, and I was looking for some sort of Michael Jordan type to figure out who I could imitate and buy hamburgers for them or whatever. But the kind of advertising they had on TV back in those days was about cigarettes. And they had you can research it, I guess, and Google it, but they had what they called the the Marlboro Man. Well, there were Marlboro cigarettes. I guess there still are. I've never smoked to speak of. But anyway, the Marlboro Man would come up, and it would always kind of be dusk, and there'd be a nice sunset in the background. He'd come riding up on his horse, and there'd be a nice fire there going, and he'd get off his horse with his cowboy hat, and he'd sit there on a log, and he'd reach down. He'd grab one of those logs, and he'd flip a cigarette out and stick it in his mouth. And then he'd light the cigarette with the burning embers from one of those logs. Well, to a young kid, I'm thinking, hey, that guy's... I mean, who goes around lighting their cigarettes with a log that's on fire? And I'm thinking, hey, man, he must be tough. He's the Marlboro Man. Well, they've discontinued cigarette advertising now on TV. But it's the same point. The cigarette companies were using the, quote, Marlboro Man because people would admire the Marlboro Man, and they would buy cigarettes to imitate the Marlboro Man, just like they would buy hamburgers to imitate Michael Jordan if he endorsed them, or Nike shoes if he endorsed those. And we do the same with clothing now, and have done forever, I guess. But it all points to the fact that we're marching to the beat, as I mentioned with Emerson. He said, and I think it was an essay on self-reliance, he said, march to the beat of your own drummer. However distant or far away. You know, he kind of lived that too. I haven't mentioned yet. He came from a long line of ministers. I forget the name of their church, but it's like a Unitarian or something church. But he came from a long line of ministers, and his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather, they were all ministers. I think it went 5 generations deep, if I remember right. But when Emerson got thinking and kind of acting on his own, understanding what made sense of it all, what didn't make sense of it all, then he broke away from that. It's not that he rejected it. They still called him back to talk to them, speak in their meetings. But he resented being an advocate for every doctrine that they believed in, because he believed in marching to the beat of his own drummer. And if you remember right, in one of the earlier videos, I talked about conformity. I think it was called Hobgoblins. A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, he says. Well, he talked the talk and walked the walk in that sense. Now, there's other areas where he didn't. And that's if I had to choose between the two of them, Emerson or Thoreau, I would choose Thoreau, because Emerson didn't do much talking. He didn't write much. He wasn't famous back in his day for any of that. But he walked the walk and wrote a little. And anyway, they were both independent in their thinking. They didn't buy Michael Jordan hamburgers or shoes, and they didn't smoke Marlboro cigarettes like we do, like we're lured into. And it's the same with the women. They have all these beauty queens that they pay to parade around in front of everybody, and stardom and Hollywood and all of that. And they live in luxury mansions because everybody watches them and idolizes them. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? The way we buy into everything. Well, I'm going to read you just this one line. This is from Walden. It says this, and then I'm going to talk about it just for a minute and call it quits for today. But hopefully it'll ignite maybe a little bit of interest. And I hope the interest that we ignite has a consequence, that it's not just me blabbering away or you mulling something over for a little while and forgetting it, moving on to the next chapter, or the next video, or the next month or year or whatever. It's easy to do. It's easy to let time slip away from us, which is why I'm reading this. It's just Thoreau's observation. Time is but a stream I go a-fishing in. I drink at it, but while I drink, I see the sandy bottom and detect how shallow it is. Its thin current slides away, but eternity remains. I can't tell you how many times I've thought of that. Time is but a stream I go fishing in. I drink at it, but while I drink, I see the sandy bottom and detect how shallow it is. Its thin current slides away, but eternity remains. I've been drinking at that stream for, in mortality, at least 75 years now. And I've seen it slide away, and I've drank at it. And I fished in it. We can stop and talk about what's the difference between drinking it and fishing in it. But on second thought, I don't want to get that deep with you today and that involved, but you stop and think about it. You go sit on the rock thing again with your hand under your chin and think about that. Okay? You'll come to some conclusions about what he might have meant there. It's just too easy for us to do the same old thing every day and never get outside ourselves. And it all starts with thought. It all starts with a prompt. And if we're prompted as we go through the day, things get interesting. Things get really interesting, and life starts to change. And I could see where if I had applied some of the things that I'm talking to you about earlier in my life, in some cases way earlier, it would have made a whole difference. Things might have been improved in lots of ways. I'm not saying my life, even with the difficulties in some areas that I've had, and they're nowhere near as difficult as some people that I know. But even with those difficulties, it's pretty easy for me to see that if I had known a certain concept or a certain truth and applied it earlier in my life, I could have saved a lot of suffering, not only for myself, but for my children, my grandchildren, and others. And I didn't. And I apologize. Because I was taught well. It just took time. And I suppose in that sense, I'm not different than a lot of people. But still, if you can do things quicker and get to from point A to point B, in your understanding at least, then you can apply what you understood life gets better. It's a little bit like playing the piano or anything else that you do in repetition and learn from. You hit a sour note on the piano, you learned what you did wrong, you change it so that you don't hit it the same way next time, and the music sounds better. That's all there is to it. And that's the way life is. I talked to you a while back about planting with a drill some grain that my dad wanted me to plant for him. That same 9-acre field, I used to plow. Our little Alice Chalmers tractor was only about a 55 or 60 horse tractor, and it had a 3-bottom plow, which meant that it was, if the ground wasn't just right, it was hard pulling. I can remember on that 9 acres, more than once plowing the ground. And again, my father had told me how to go about it. And I didn't think it was rocket science, because you just put one wheel in the furrow and follow that furrow that you'd made from the previous pass through down the field. You put that wheel in the furrow and away you go. There wasn't anything really to tell you what else to do. You just pulled the plow and plowed another a 3-bottom plow. So you plow another three furrows and tip them over. And when you get to the end of the field, you turn it over and turn the plow over and start back and throw it the opposite way so that the field was even and nice. But I'll never forget, the reason I'm telling you this story, I'll never forget. And I've thought back on it often. And I want you to think about it. So that's why I'm telling it to you. But as easy as that was, in fact, it kind of got boring, because you just put the wheel in the furrow, and the tractor would almost drive itself. It couldn't get out of the furrow. The wheel couldn't on either side, because there was clumps of dirt on one side and hard ground on the other. It'd just pretty much stay there. So you'd get kind of bored, and you think, oh my, it's going to be a long day. It's going to be a long day. And I go back and forth, and then I start to notice something. I started to notice that furrow that I was making, the piece that 9-acre was kind of rectangular. It was kind of long and narrower but longer, and kind of on a hillside too, but a little bit of a sloping hill. But I started to notice that the furrow was starting to look like should we say, a snake. It was getting some bows in it. Wasn't as straight as it used to be. And I thought, well, there's nothing else I can do. I'll just stick my wheel in the furrow and watch it go down through the field and turn it around and keep doing the same thing over and over again. And I did it, and it just got almost unbearably crooked with that approach. And it got so bad that I had to pull up the plow and go back to those areas where the furrow had kind of a belly in it and was not straight. Other places it looked like it had more of a hump up the field. And like I said, anyway, it took me, I don't know how long, to go back and try to get it all looking straight again. Well, I won't go through it all again, but so then I tried again, it would do the same thing. After a few furrows, I'd notice it coming again, and now I was more aware of it, but I didn't know what I was doing wrong, and then I tried something different. Let me tell you what it was. This is the part that's kind of stayed with me, and I hope it'll kind of stay with you. I thought, I'm getting crooked here. What I need to do is, as I start back through the field, I need to put my eye, and this is after I'd straightened it all out again with the plow fixing, but I need to put my eye, and I'd get my eye fixed on a tree. way, way off in the distance in the direction that I was pulling the plow, way beyond where even the field was. And I would keep, instead of watching the wheel in the furrow and not doing much about it, I kept my eye on that tree way, way off in the distance. And I would, of course, keep my hands on the steering wheel. And I didn't look at the furrow or the wheel that was in the furrow. I just kept my hands on the steering wheel and I looked at that tree clear off in the distance. And I found out that if I did that, my furrows up through that field, as I finished it and wound it all up for a complete job, I found that fields, and I looked back on it afterwards, and you could see the first half, about half of the field had furrows in it that were twisted and turned, and like I said, kind of looked like a snake. And the last half of that field was just as straight as an arrow, it seemed to me. Those furrows were just aligned, and the only thing that I did any differently was instead of focusing on the furrow up close, I focused on something way off in the distance. And then things went better. Well, you might be able to see where I'm going with all this. But that thing that needs to be focused on way off in the distance is those words that come from the Lord that I've been talking about, that you're getting tired of hearing it, I know. But those whisperings, if we follow them, they'll come more often, and pretty soon we'll be focused on them. And you'd be surprised how many of them come in a day. Last time, I think I mentioned my hot sauce packets and rinsing the cup off in the sink. But you know, that's just scratching the surface. And there's, I think I mentioned in one of the others, parking the carts in the parking lot when you're done shopping, as opposed to, or taking them back into the store as opposed to just shoving them somewhere like everybody else does. When that comes as a whispering and you heed it, you get that good feeling, just like I did with the sauce packets. I thought afterwards, these people that watch this are going to think I'm really strange and stupid. But the point I was trying to make is, it's in the details of our lives. It's all around us. It's smiling at somebody on the street. It's talking to, I had my little granddaughter with me one day and we're in the parking lot. She couldn't figure out what we were doing. I just out in the middle of the parking lot, I pulled the truck up alongside of some garbage that somebody had just thrown out into the parking lot. I says, because I was trying to teach her something too. I said, if I don't pick that up, I don't think anybody else will. Do you? And I remember she said, I don't know. It's like, really? I mean, what difference does it make, really? But I took some time and cleaned it up as best I could and went and put it in a dumpster. And it gave me a good feeling. And I tried to explain to her that good feeling was like the second message. It's like the first message was do it, and then there's always that second message, that confirmation message that says, "Nice job. I'm proud of you." Kind of like my dad said when I drilled the grain, it all came up in the right place. After about 10 days, he says, "Nice job. I'm proud of you." Happens all day long. We should journal it right from the time we wake up in the morning right from the first time we open our eyes and take a deep breath. When I make my bed in the morning, I pull the last wrinkle out of the cover on the bed. And when I do that, I think of my mother. And I think I've told you in one of the other clips that she always taught me that if you make your bed, if you do a good job making a bed, you can do a good job making your day. Well, she's long gone, but when I pull that last wrinkle out of my bed, I always think of her. And then I think, well, she taught me how to heed promptings, and I'm been a slow learner, but I'm learning, and I'm trying to pass on what I learn, because the quality of your day gets affected by those choices you make. Now, we've run out of time again, and you may have watched enough of these now that you're thinking, oh, his voice sounds the same every time, and after all, he's just an old man, and he learned just like I did, and there's plenty of time. I'll learn it just like he did after I feel the need. Well, let me read this to you one more time. Time is but a stream I go fishing in. Time is the minutes of the day. Time is but a stream I go fishing in. I drink at it, but while I drink, I see the sandy bottom and detect how shallow it is. Its thin current slides away, but eternity remains. Eternity. We're in this for the long haul. We're in this to stay focused on that mark clear off on the far side of the field and beyond that goes through this life and into eternity. And this life gets easier as we stay focused on that. I know that to be a fact. I've lived it, and I know it to be a fact. I'm not yet to the other side, but I still sense that thin current sliding away, and that I need to do what I can to help you and anybody else that'll listen learn from some of the mistakes that I've made. And it's my prayer that you won't just ignore the prompting to look for that marker further off in the distance and stay focused on hearing him, who is our Lord and Savior. And one of these days we'll talk more about the whole plan, because I know a lot more than I'm saying, and it'll unfold. But these are the important, critical things that up front that we're doing. We're kind of building the outside edge to this puzzle. And I can't get into a lot of detail because I'm into this one almost 34 minutes already, and I know some of you are glazed over and gone to sleep maybe, and it'll never impact you because of that. So I got to keep them short. But my intent is, as we get down the road, is to, after we've put this framework in place, put these truths that are on the hard rock bottom, where we set our lampposts to live by, as I mentioned in the introduction, that when we can do that, life gets better, and then we can fill in the other parts. And like I said, I intend to do that for those that will keep listening, and I hope you will. There's so much to distract us. And there's some really core things that matter that are going to slip away just like the water in the stream if we don't act on what we're being prompted to do. Have a good day, a good night, whatever time of the day you watch this. I will be back. Thanks.